Cooper, Jackie, I'm not sure if you could speak to it, but like social or bars are allowed in commercial districts, if I recall. That was one of the changes we made in permitted uses. Is that something, a social club or something I had? I don't know if you have anything in front of you that we could check, but I'm just thinking it seems odd that.
I'm sorry, I'm really having trouble hearing you guys. I don't know why.
In commercial districts, when we made a bunch of changes to permitted uses, is it accurate that we allow bars or social clubs in those areas? I'm just wondering because it seems like there's a...
Do you want to come up and read?
Because I know we made a number of changes to permitted uses. I don't have it in front of me, but my thinking was it's odd that you could arguably play with vagueness of some of these definitions to suggest one thing functions as something else.
And you're asking about social clubs? I'm sorry, it's a little rusty.
Social clubs or
Private clubs?
bars, yes.
Private clubs,
Yeah,
so we do not have hours established in the zoning ordinance for anything at this point other than after hours club, and that goes through a whole different process. Private club designation has not, there's no liquor laws that they have to allow them. They can operate just as a simple club and be open all hours of the night at this time.
Right. So that answers my question.
Okay,
So I was wondering
perfect.
if something could arguably operate kind of within the gray area of definitions and serve that same
I
function.
agree, it needs defined at this point.
Okay.
If City Hall Planning and Zoning has any other amendments they would like us to start to consider to put a tranche of amendments through, we are eager and willing to get things moving because
That's great, thank you. Thank you
time
for the
is money.
support.
Yes.
Good. Thank you.
Anything else?
Yes.
Did you want me to tell you some of those amendments right now?
Yeah, we'd be-
Sure,
yeah,
yeah, I
well-
can do that, and then
Our-
I can say the same thing also during my update during the meeting. So, Jason, what you submitted in terms of the neighborhood commercial centers, you're very much aligned with what was found during our character area analysis that was presented here about a year ago, in that many of the variances that we're seeing that are coming through zoning hearing board have to do with just that, is allowing mixed use in our R1, R2, R3 districts, or even also in those C4 areas. So it's very much aligned with that analysis that we did. Some of the other things that have come up, not only here at Planning Commission, but also discussions internally that we've had where there's been pain points that the new administration has acknowledged and also our council has acknowledged, are things like dollar stores, the proliferation of dollar stores that have, we've seen throughout the city in the last probably 20 years. And some of those have closed, and what then goes back in that place. Vape shops is another thing that has come up oftentimes. Games of chance, like you mentioned. There's been discussion around data centers and making sure that we're, at least it's somewhere defined, somewhere in our code, so that if, in fact, we don't have a lot of land in urbanized areas to house these type of facilities, but making sure that we have protection with the code there. Also parking, certain public areas and pathways and screening we've talked about, especially in the waterfront conditional use. And as I mentioned to you before, and maybe I haven't, but there is currently a waterfront master plan in the works that's being driven by Infinity Erie, but the city is very much involved in that process. In fact, there's going to be a press release next week on it so that the community will know more about this plan and the time frame, the boundaries, what they're looking at. It's expected to be complete by the fall, so it's a pretty aggressive timeline. And we're hoping that what comes out of that plan will drive some of the changes needed for waterfront conditional use. As you've seen, some of the, there's been some gray area and some maybe room for improvement around the language within that section. Another thing we've talked about, ADUs. ADUs, the language, there's also some improvement around the language for ADUs. I know that you adopted that language, and it was fully adopted through council, but we've had several internal discussions and done some comparison with other areas that there's some need for improvement, maybe some more guardrails around that ADU language.
Can you elaborate further on that? It's too tight or too loose?
I think that it's, I don't think it's necessarily that. It's more about making sure that it's more defined. So I don't know if it's about like the stringent or more regulations. I think it's making sure that it's understood where and how it can be used.
Like they need to be accessory, not primary?
I think some of those definitions have to be looked at further, yes. So to the generalization, making sure that there's really clear language in there for an applicant.
So, sorry to interrupt. So a moment ago, you had mentioned parking with respect to Bayfront. I mean, personally, I'm of the opinion I would like to completely eliminate parking minimums. That's just my personal position on it. I'm curious what the thinking or kind of perspective is on what types of changes that or what the expectation is. I mean, because right now, half the Bayfront is paved over.
Yeah, well, a lot of this conversation came up at the Bayfront, when we've had the two development plans that have come through, reducing parking requirements, especially on the Bayfront. That's our primary focus. I can't give you exactly what path we're going down, but yeah, we're looking at it in terms of land development and what we can also put not only in the code, but possibly in the code or in SALDO to require parking studies. Also, we're not requiring that when there's a land development that comes through, or even when there's maybe a zoning change. So the other thing is, and I don't think that planned residential development has come in front of this commission. I don't know if Rich, you've had any experience with that. We haven't done a deep dive into whether the city has used, it's 308, section 308 of the code, zoning code. It is, I don't know if it's ever been used in the city. It has to be over a development that's over 25,000 square feet. But there's a potential development that has been brought to our attention that could utilize this particular type of zoning called planned residential development. And it really allows for more flexibility, but there are some kind of antiquated language in the code that might have had some purpose years ago that really is not, it doesn't apply. And we would like to change that language to update it and make it a bit more flexible. So that's another piece that we're looking at. I don't think that you've had any experience
No.
With that has to go through Planning Commission, and it actually has to formally be approved as a PRD through council as well. And it's on the official zoning map signified as a planned residential development. So it's a little bit different process and governed by the MPC. We have not used it, like I said, but it's a possible additional tool that we could offer to the developer. if they want to go that route.
That one
We
looked
are
at-
just learning about it a little bit
Yeah.
more, honestly, and so maybe next plan, if we're going to propose amendments, we can talk through this a little bit more at the next planning commission. We can go through and explain further the PRD. But
I think
if,
that would be useful.
yeah, if
Does
you
that
would
apply
like,
to subdivisions like the one we looked at on the Bayfront Highway, like the Bird Drive?
that, it could be
Because-
used for
yeah.
something like
This
that.
is
That's right.
Multiple parcels, many units, or
It
many
does-
units on one parcel?
From, the word contiguous is not found within the language, so if it's even a block with multiple parcels, let's say, that seems to fit the definition. There's also some compliance with, upholding comprehensive plans, neighborhood plans, really working with the city. It talks a lot about design. It's very different than some of the other language on zoning codes. So, but we're just in the midst of kind of exploring this. I don't know if the city's ever used this kind of zoning before, but we had a discussion this morning about it with our consultants, and they seem to say that this is an appropriate way to use it in certain developments, especially ones that don't fit. And let's say it's a neighborhood and they want to put ground floor retail and put small mixed use in. It's a way to enable a variety of housing types and potentially mixed use. And so it allows for flexibility. And it's a collaborative process that has to be taken with the city and with the developer. So, Section 308, I can give you the exact page if you'd like. I'll send you the section. I have it marked here. It's Section 308, page 94 of the zoning code. But if you search it on E-code, it's Section 308, Planned Residential Development. And please pay particular attention to the purpose, because it talks about this alternative patterns and housing types. That purpose should be altered as well to include mixed use. So it's specific to a variety of housing, but it really should, this is an urban area. We should have these types of flexibility with the mixed use.
Well, that's I think, a through line through the entire zoning code, which is mostly that it's targeted at more suburban mindset than an urban. And you can see that in certainly post-war development of Erie, as it tried to keep up, but it has done a lot of disservice to the older neighborhoods in the city that don't come anywhere close to complying with intent of the zoning code. So.
Some restrictions would be a good thing, though. I don't think we want to become a land of cul-de-sacs.
Oh, no, I don't think so either, but that's, I think that's part why setting out what the purpose and the intent and what's going to be acceptable will be important to articulate.
Currently, the planned residential development, you have to have a minimum of 25,000 square feet of land. There's density requirements that might not make sense. And then there's also an open space requirement as well. So we can work on that language to include potentially some design features and put in language that is applicable to this day and age. So.
I would love to see some density bonuses start to be incorporated in some of the developments too. We've got to fix the tax base, and that's not going to happen by little one-off pieces here and there. We need density, but that's for another day.
Yeah, PRDs do have potential to be denser than a more standard process, and there are ways in the language already that you can increase the density further by, I think, appealing to city council. You can just get 10% if they say yes. You can get another 10% if you provide more open space. And I think you can get a further 17% if you
27.
incorporate some sort of more robust feature like a swimming pool or something in the development. So there are ways to increase the density through PRD.
But if we want to remove those density restrictions and do something, have language that for some reason that must have been there for some point in time,
I really wanted swimming
right.
pools.
But we can change that language, and it makes more sense to amend the text there than to potentially start changing our zoning districts at this moment. But yes, right, to Cooper's point, the current language, the density that was what it allowed for, was this PRD, especially in a city that was built on really that single-family residential mostly, yeah. So hopefully next meeting, we'll have a more concrete list for you of what we're going to start working on, and
Count
provide
8 total
8 total.
amendments.
Okay.
Let's get to work, right?
Okay.
So you had mentioned, or I guess my understanding is Infinite Erie is leading this whole master plan stuff up front. I understand that you're on the advisory committee or whatever, steering committee, and there are other people. Personally, I would love to see Infinite Erie, come here and maybe engage the planning commission in some things, whether it's just letting us know what they're working on. I mean, they are not a government body. I think what they are charged with doing is admirable, and I hope there's success. But at the end of the day, it feels like, the tail wagging the dog. We are the planning commission. It is our job to try and help facilitate some of the changes the community needs. It would be helpful for them to actually engage this body and perhaps even just attend to hear what we're talking about, let alone maybe informing us a bit of what's going on. So I would love to see them actually just involve us in the process that we're supposed to be involved in.
I don't think the citizens of Erie ever elected Infinite Erie, right? So,
I mean, this is that hearing, this is that forum for them to hear some of that.
no.
I can speak to those that are on the steering committee and ask that perhaps they come and attend and let you know what the scope of the project is. Like I mentioned, that's going to be coming out here in the public very shortly. So, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Try to get them on the agenda maybe for next time.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had one other thing that I wanted to bring up. I've one community that's been incredibly successful at infill housing development and some of the missing middle is South Bend, Indiana. I know I've shared it with members here a few times. Their city took the initiative of purchasing a variety of housing plans and making them publicly available for free, pre-approved for permitting, zoning, all of that. And in doing so, help to reduce the cost of construction by anywhere from 10 to 20%, depending on properties and selections. Erie has a number, the land bank in particular has a number of vacant properties. There's properties, for development. Obviously, new construction in a place like Erie is generally more expensive than rehabbing something. Unfortunately, rehabbing an empty lot doesn't really work. I would love to see some perhaps discussion or conversation from council and exploring allocating funds so that there could be a library of plans that citizens, they can go get a lot for $500, pick a plan for free, and now they're able to go build their forever home for their family. Something that South Bend has had a couple hundred new infill developments, missing middle type, single family houses built as a result of it. It's been incredibly effective for them. It's been adopted, something similar by many other communities. I think Erie is a place that would also greatly benefit from exploring something like that. So I'd love to see if we can get council to explore some of those, if planning can look into maybe how that might work in Erie, if we can replicate what South Bend has done. But just one of those things that we can do to try and, I think, make housing more affordable and accessible for a good portion of the community here.
Colin, in your research, because we've done a little research around this as well, have you come across any of this type of housing plans have you come across anything in Pennsylvania?
I've now, one of the limitations, or one of the concerns I saw raised was on the permitting side of it, is the communities that have talked about it were not necessarily eager to say, yes, we've permitted or adjusted these plans to comply with all local zoning, building, what have you. They didn't want to spend the money to have their engineers basically go through the process, and didn't want to put in place the language that says, as long as you do not change a single thing on this paper, then it's good. It's the potential for somebody to change it is where, at least my understanding or interpretation of reading, was where they had concern of somebody changing the plans and not actually complying with the permits or zoning in place. So personally, I see that as a separate issue of you need to address people complying with their permits and zoning, not you're making plans available to your community to actually build. But it's one of those crazy ideas, of offering something to actually solve a problem rather than, throwing money at 10 times cost to build for quote unquote affordable housing. So.
And it's not affecting just the zoning code, but it's also affecting the building code too, in some of these instances, if you're creating units with more than 4, creating housing with more than 4 units.
So it absolutely would. But what I have looked at, and my view on this from Erie is it's more targeted for single family dwellings for that missing middle. I mean, the lots that these ideally would fit on are not going to be, 3 4-plexes. Potentially, I guess, a duplex if there are plans for it, but I don't know that that's. I think that gets into the conversation of it becomes cost prohibitive and doesn't achieve the intended goal. So these are the things that I think it would be helpful to have that conversation and see if we can find the sweet spot for Erie and say, look, can we come up with a dozen different housing plans that we can, address with building code, zoning, density, all those things that we want to, and it still provides, an avenue for home ownership for people.
Yeah, many years ago, we did a house for Habitat for Humanity. I gave them the plans that went through the city's approval process, and they built numerous versions of that over the years. Now, that was many years ago, so I'm sure that what they do now has certainly evolved as their needs have changed, but it certainly would seem possible to do that. Yeah. My concern is that the cost of new construction is going to be very tough without other kinds of financial assistance from the state, from the city, or some other entity to be able to buy down the cost of construction.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and that's why I think this is one piece of a
Yeah.
bigger puzzle, but
Yep.
you nailed it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the price of everything's gone up so substantially. I mean, even, baseline finishes are
Yeah.
through the nose.
Agree. Thank you. Anybody else have any other thoughts or comments? Then, it being 20 to 2, I suggest we move on to the regular meeting. Without objection, we'll move on. Thank you. Colin, you want to read the Hooper. Sorry. Anyone do the roll?
Chair Rich Spiker,
Here.
Vice Chair Douglas Bizarni,
Here.
Commissioner Carl Anderson, Commissioner Colin Russ,
Present.
Commissioner Jason Wazorek,
Present.
Bureau Chief Jacqueline Spry,
Here.
Staff Liaison Cooper Moore, I'm here.
Thank you. First item is approval of the April 21st, 2026 meeting minutes. We've all received copies of it, distributed previously. Any changes or alterations, updates?
Nope, motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Any public comment or correspondence?
Hello, Kathy Schaff, Erie City. I'm speaking actually as a citizen of Erie my entire life, and it was good to hear you talking today, and I affirm everything that you've been talking about. I live on 43rd and Rice. I can go to dollar stores in the 38th and Zimmerman area, or I can go right down McCullen on Buffalo Road. We have plenty, or I could go up above on the Grandview area has one too. So we have enough dollar stores. I affirm that we have enough gas stations and convenience stores that were just proliferated by them, and smoke shops. It'd be good to have like a GPS map and say, okay, the next time someone wants a gas station, where is it going to go, or if it's needed at all. And the same with the convenience stores, the dollar stores, because some areas have way more than others. And I agree with those lottery game skills type of whatever they're called. I actually started doing like a count one time within like a 2-mile stretch on the Buffalo Road area. There was more than what I thought was needed. So I agree with everything you're saying. So that is very good. It's just too bad we can't go back to those olden days. My dad built his own house for $11,000, and he wasn't even an architect, but I remembered diligently. He had a table and he spread out, and he and my mother made the plans. My uncle did the same thing. They built their house at the same time, not far away from each other. And, 11,000, 13,000, my in-laws made theirs on the west side of Erie for 11,000, but those days are gone. But I did watch the Fifth and Cherry condo apartments, whatever they are, go up within the last few years, and I saw the boxed homes, as I would call them, down by the bayfront. They were at Bayview Park, and they're up, they're in place now. So I don't know how much those already made homes are, but we do have one in Erie, Fifth and Cherry, that I watched being put up. So again, we need to do something. And I don't know if it's possible to even do this, but sometimes you get the same people buying things because they have money. And it's not necessarily out-of-town people, but it would be so nice if people would get the land for like the $300 repository sale or whatever, and just let them, go with a plan that a bank would affirm their trying very hard or what have you, and be able to do that, because affordability, I have 30-year-old people who say, know them, that, that's not going to happen in their lifetime. They're just going to keep renting. And, they'd like to own a house. And I myself I was 24 when we got our house, and I've been in it ever since 1987, and did the first-time home buyer mortgage. So, we have to give people a chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? Any correspondence?
We have not received any correspondence.
Okay, thank you. Old business, there being none on the agenda, we'll move on. New business, subdivision, East Front Street. Minor subdivision submitted by Mike Sanford on behalf of Scott Bayfront Development. Presented for final approval.
Thank you. Thank you, Planning Commission. This is Mike Sanford. I'm the surveyor that prepared the plan. And essentially, we're looking to consolidate 3 tax parcels, little tax parcels, and a portion of a 4th. So what you're looking at on your screen now is the 4 current tax parcels. And on the next sheet shows the new lot we're trying to create. So this is a subdivision plan to create 1 new lot of record.
Motion
And
to approve.
that's the new lot.
Okay,
I'll second.
motion by Jason to approve.
I'll second.
Mr. Russ? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Please note that I have abstained. Thank you. All right. Harbor Place, now on to land development. Harbor Place Phase 2. Major land development submitted by Mike Sanford on behalf of Scott Bayfront Development. Presented for preliminary approval.
Again, this is Mike Sanford. I'll do some initial discussion here, but I may defer to Brian Weber to add any additional comments he may wish to. But this is a preliminary land development plan. It's primarily focused upon the construction of a new hotel that is east of the current hotel. It is shown there on your screen, and it's situated on Lot 2, which we just discussed with the subdivision plan. So this is a currently proposed 7-story hotel, and it has off-street parking located both on the north and south sides of Front Street. We submitted our parking count to demonstrate that we have adequate off-street parking for not only the existing hotel, but this new hotel, Oliver's Beer Garden, and the mini golf. So we do have adequate off-street parking pursuant to the ordinance. Of course, the new hotel will be serviced by public water and public sewer. We currently have an NPDES permit with the DEP in Meadville for the property, and that's a current NPDES permit. And we have submitted our stormwater calculations. They were submitted actually back with the first hotel, but we did submit them again, our storm conveyance plan, that the stormwater would be collected into a system owned and operated by Mr. Scott and discharged into the bay, all pursuant to the NPDES permit. We do meet all the water quality requirements that DEP enforces for this project. So I guess I'm just here to answer any questions you may have. I did submit the ancillary data form as well. I assume you had an opportunity to review that. That takes you through various other information on the project, such as sewage planning that's already in place, floodplain, There is a small portion of a floodplain that would be filled to elevate it above the floodplain elevation pursuant to your ordinance. And so just any questions you may have, I'm here to answer them, or Brian Weber may wish to add more to the presentation.
Any commissioners have questions at this point?
No, I will move to approve.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any opposition? Good. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Please note that I'll, again, abstain.
Okay, thank you all for your time today and your vote for the project, and we look forward to receiving comments from engineering and then submitting our final plan and hopefully be before you next month as well.
Thank you. Have a good day. Item C, rezoning. None. Item D, waterfront conditional use. None. Blighted property designation. None. Noted. Historic property nomination. 2 items. There is one for 1519 West 6th Street for the Spencer House, bed and breakfast. Is Matt here? Oh, he's on the line. Okay, great.
Thank you, Commissioners, for letting me join you remotely today. Is everyone able to hear? I know that there were some audio technical issues earlier.
All good.
We can hear you.
All right, okay. We received a nomination for the William and Mary Spencer House. The process to date has been that the Historic Review Commission met earlier this month on the 4th and reviewed the nomination. They found that there was reasonable cause for the building to be declared a City of Erie Historic Landmark, and they provided a positive recommendation to City Council. So before you today is that exact same nomination, and we'll be going over how it relates to the different plans that city has. The resource is located at 519 West 6th Street, which is in the R West Bayfront neighborhood. They were contacted about the nomination and are supportive of it being declared a city historic landmark. We'll go through a site map and some photos. I am very certain all of you are familiar with this building, as it is absolutely iconic. Even within the West 6th Street Historic District, which is listed on the National Register, this building stands out because of its exceptional architectural design. So here you see a view from 6th Street, a bit closer look at the porch on left, the porch from the street in the middle, and then some of the fish scale slate work of the roof, as well as the kind of ornate patterns present in the brickwork of the building. Here you have a close-up of the stained glass transom above the front door with an S kind of in the stained glass, which of course relates back to the Spencer family, who both built and lived in the house. And that takes us to a bit of what the Historic Review Commission considered in their deliberations. The building itself was paid for by Judah Colt Spencer, who was a very prominent person in Erie's past and responsible for founding the First National Bank of Erie in 1863. He paid for the house's construction in 1871 for his son, William Spencer. In 1880, William Spencer marries Mary Dupree, then Spencer, and continued to live in the house. And the Spencer family, continued to live in the house for decades. Both William and Mary Spencer had a rather large family, 4 sons and 2 daughters, all of whom grew up in the house. They were very socially prominent people within the community, within their church, within both kind of the financial industry here in Erie, as well as civic government, and would often use the house and the grounds as kind of a means to host different parties and different fundraisers for organizations in the city. It would pass on to their descendants. Both William and Mary would pass away in the house itself. Their children would continue to live in up until the 1980s. And then in 1991, the house was purchased and converted into a bed and breakfast. And the current owners, Steve and Lisa Fraze, purchased it in 2018 and continue operating the building as a bed and breakfast. To give you a bit of a tie back to the Spencer family, so what you see on the left is a view down State Street. All of these buildings are unfortunately no longer with us, with the exception of the building on the far left. The bank building is that which was founded by Judith Spencer Holt. During the urban redevelopment of the 1960s, that building, the facade of the building, was actually deconstructed and then moved. And so what you see here, the picture on the right, is the building that continues to exist, I think, on 26th Street, no longer on State. But the family and the bank had made the arrangements for the building to be moved because they felt it was such an integral part of Erie's history. The Historic Review Commission, in addition to considering kind of all the different machinations of why this has significance to us, also looked at whether or not there is historic integrity in the building that's worthy of preservation or restoration. For those of you that haven't had the opportunity to be inside the bed and breakfast, the outside has, I think, as high a degree of historic integrity as the inside does. Here you see a view of the parlor and the dining room. Our architectural survey that the city conducted in 2025 recognized that this building is already listed on the National Register as a contributing element to the 6th Street National Register Historic District, but that it can independently be listed because of the house's significance, both in architecture and its cultural value to the city. So this takes us to the findings of the HRC. As I mentioned earlier, they found that there was reasonable cause, I'm sorry, not that the forming block, but that the Spencer House has historic significance because it is associated with William Spencer and Mary Capri Spencer, and that it has a high degree of architectural integrity and is an excellent example of Second Empire. And their recommendation to City Council was just that the building be listed because of its association with the Spencers, as well as its exemplification of an architectural style. So then your responsibility today as Planning Commission is to consider whether the designation is consistent with our comprehensive plan, other developmental plans and policies, and transmit a report detailing your recommendations to City Council. The comprehensive plan, which I know we always get to talk about during these presentations, does mention historic assets, and this is no different. This house in the West Street district has already been identified as a historic asset. To take us kind of into our West neighborhood plan, it is one of the neighborhoods that has the highest concentration of historic assets in our city. And here you'll see the most of this blue is what is now the West Street Historic District, and the red arrow points to where this house is in relation to that. The neighborhood plan is very much kind of cognizant of this history and incorporates it into the plan itself. And so when we are kind of reviewing the Our West Bayfront Community Plan, they talk about community history, the history of the neighborhood itself, and they point out here, as you see on the lower right, that historic preservation is part of the mission of the organization. The neighborhood plan, because it was composed in 2016, actually predates the existence of the city's historic preservation program, but even within the plan itself, they call for a system to be created by which local landmarks can be recognized. So the designation of this particular property fits in very well to the overall neighborhood plan. Also, it relates to our historic preservation plan that was adopted by the city 2 years ago, in that it is both looking to list new landmarks within the city's register and also pursue individual landmarks on the National Register of Historic Places. So this brings me to, again, back to your responsibilities as a commission. And I have some suggested language for you, should you wish to make a motion, but I'm also happy to answer any questions that you may have about this nomination.
Motion to approve.
Second.
You have a motion and a second? Your motion encompass? recommended?
Motion to utilize the recommended language. Thank you, Matt.
Seconded.
Second, okay. Thank you. We have a motion and a second encompassing the recommended language to council. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? No? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item. This is 1013 and 1015 State Street, the Foreman Block.
Thank you, Commissioners. So this takes us then to our second nomination, which is the Foreman Block downtown. Here you'll see several historic images of the block itself. I think this is probably the most relatable to us today. This is on the left-hand side, the earliest photographic evidence we were able to find of the building. Largely, it resembles what we, I think, continue to have today. Again, this was heard before the Historic Review Commission earlier this month. They determined that there was reasonable cause for the building to be listed as a city historic landmark and made a positive recommendation to council. The building has two addresses and is located at 1013 and 1015 State Street, which is in our downtown, which is covered by two different organizations, the Erie Downtown Partnership and the Erie Downtown Development Corporation. Again, both were notified of the nomination and expressed support. So here you have a site map with the resource that is bounded in red. And here is an image of the resource from State Street with some detail shots, primarily of the facade facing State Street. Although the image on the right-hand side is particularly interesting because it's a ghost sign that relates it back to its creator, the Foreman Brothers, which is why this building is brought to you and named as the Foreman Block. When it was constructed originally, it served three different purposes. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But here's the building again. And then we can dig into the history a bit. The building was constructed in 1885 as the Foreman Block. It originally, as I mentioned, served three different functions. So the first floor of the building was always commercial storefront space. The second floor of the building was office space that was kind of what we would consider now flex office space. So either a business or somebody that needed kind of office space for a very kind of limited period of time, either weeks or months on end, would be able to rent either individual offices or blocks of offices and then operate out of the building's second floor. The third floor was, I think, what we would equate today as a bit of a boutique hotel. They were rooms to let that were high end and would be kind of, again, available to rent for a week or a month at a time. So here's, I think, an excellent example of a building that was really meant to kind of capture all the different components of our zoning code before our zoning code existed. The building changed hands several times over the course of its history, but its longest owner and tenant was the Winter family, who operated the Winter piano company out of the building. And so for much of its history, the first floor was the Winter Piano Company's kind of sale headquarters. The second floor was primarily their offices, and the third floor was largely used for piano storage. There were modifications made to the building over its history that reflected that business. In some historic images, and I think for those of you who are very familiar with the building, it once had at least the southern portion of the building had a very ornate Art Deco facade that was the Winter Company, and then the Winter Inn, that has since been removed and is now been restored to something that would have been similar to what it looked like during the Victorian era. This building, too, was part of our 2025 architectural survey. Those consultants recommended that this resource be listed independently on the National Register. And here is a snapshot of the building's interior. So on left, you can see the grand staircase that led people from the State Street into the businesses and the hotel space of the second and third floor. There's a remarkably high degree of historic integrity in that the building has been modified, well, over the course of history, a relatively kind of few amount of times. A lot of the woodwork is still there. Kind of what you see here, even though it's the ceiling's missing with plaster, it still has all the different components of when the building was first constructed, which is pretty exceptional. The HRC found that there is reasonable cause for the Foreman block to become a historic landmark. They also provided, as I mentioned earlier, a positive recommendation to City Council. So again, your job today is to consider how this nomination fits in with various plans the city's adopted, and then make a recommendation to council. Again, our cultural resource plan identifies the importance of historic assets in our planning processes. Interestingly enough, this does focus on downtown, specifically calling out the kind of inequality of an uneven treatment of the built environment. As you can see, this building was part of that. It also shows up in the master plan for downtown. It does talk not necessarily about this particular building, but about the importance of historic facades, of encouraging rehabilitation of vacant buildings, especially buildings that are perhaps occupied on the first floor, but not second and third. And so because of, I think, the circumstances of this particular building, it fits well into the aspirations for downtown's improvement. Interestingly enough, the second component of the downtown plan, which is their streetscape, actually brought attention something that I think no longer exists, that the Winter Piano Company that's circled here kind of in red was, I believe, originally part of the pavement at the time that this plan was put together. Unfortunately, is no longer with us, but nice to have it at least be documented in this way so we could add it to its file. And then finally, it takes us back to our historic preservation plan, where again, relatively straightforward. The plan calls for creating new landmarks and listing new landmarks within the National Register. I can tell you that in conversations with the owner, who is the person who brought this kind of forward to us, they were very interested in exploring the use of historic tax credits in the rehabilitation of building, and as taking advantage of the city program to help kind of bridge them into that area. So that takes us finally and to the image of the Winter Company, or that I mentioned earlier. I have recommended language for you. Should you wish to make a positive recommendation to City Council, I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Motion to approve as noted in the approved language, recommended language.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? There being none, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Now on to G, saldo amendments.
We have put together a number of amendments to the subdivision and land development ordinance that were sent to you last week. I'm happy to run through them in the document, but if you have any specific questions, maybe we start there.
You give a high-level overview of what they entail?
Yes, so the first one here is intended to capture surface parking, which is currently not reviewed as a land development. And theoretically, someone could pave an entire city block for the use of parking, and the Planning Commission would not be made aware of that. So this first amendment is to capture surface parking lots for review, and they would always be treated as minor land developments and seen and approved once.
Okay.
We also have language that we already have as a policy, but are formalizing in the ordinance here about additions to build the existing buildings. And when the addition is less than 5,000 square feet, we would not review that or treat it as a land development, because typically that's adding an elevator bay or something minor that wouldn't affect the site. Also not treated as land developments are resurfacing, repair, and maintenance of existing parking lots that do not increase the total impervious area, and minor site improvements determined by the city to have a negligible impact on drainage.
Anyone in the commission have a question for? Oop.
I don't remember where they all were. Yeah. Is it?
I believe so. I'm going to recommend. We have to go to the council. So I think we're probably.
Okay, we also have a requirement as part of a complete application for a land development that a developer submit a letter from a neighborhood organization that encompasses the project site, dated within 90 days of the application, that includes a summary of the proposed development as it was presented to the organization, a summary of feedback and comments from the organization, documentation of any meetings and presentations, and a statement describing how the applicant addressed, incorporated, or otherwise responded to the feedback received. If they are unable to obtain a letter from an organization, they'll submit a letter detailing outreach efforts that were undertaken, and the Planning Commission will determine whether or not that satisfies the intent of the section. And then the Planning Commission shall consider, but not be bound by, the feedback from the neighborhood organization in reviewing the application. Questions on that one?
Anyone have a question? No? Thank you. So, one more?
Yes. This one's pretty extensive, but it's requiring traffic impact studies for developments in the city along the high injury network that we identified through the Safe Streets or Road for All Safety Action Plan. If it involves 25 or more dwelling units, if we're anticipating 100 or more peak hour trips, a traffic impact study would need to be prepared. It details the contents of the traffic impact study, and this is all something that our engineering department would use. This section comes at their request. That would discuss how increased traffic is going to be handled, describing existing traffic conditions, estimating future trip projections, and impacts of this new development on existing traffic patterns, with any conclusions, and a final report, including all of the data and analysis, will be provided for consideration along with the application.
Can you go back to the triggers on that? It was 25 units or 100 peak hour?
Yeah, 25 or more dwelling units, or an anticipated 100 or more peak hour trips.
How do you determine that without the study itself?
If the development is going to have more than 100 employees, say, that might be leaving at rush hour or something.
See, I like the rest of the amendments, but I'm not a fan of this traffic study bit with it. I appreciate the
So this is really driven, remember, the Saldo is, some of it is planning related, and a lot of it is technical in terms of engineering. And this was a recommendation that came from specifically the engineering department. So we may not be able to answer all of these questions. Leanne was not able to make it today, even though we tried to get her to be here. She had another meeting. So there's the reasoning behind it, I think, really lives within the engineering department as to why they're requesting this.
Can we approve the other two without this one?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to kill this. I think we just need
I'd like
to
to
discuss
table
it
it,
further and
yeah.
tweak it.
Sure, table Appendix C.
But
Yeah,
Motion to approve all except for Appendix C.
Second.
Okay, there is a motion to approve the modification to the, recommended modifications to the saldo, except for reference C, or Appendix C, excuse me. Any further discussion? I'm curious, what's your objection to?
I just want clarification. I feel that trigger is kind of like it's somebody's guess.
Yeah.
How do you know how many people live in that development to determine that 100 cars are moving at peak hour or not? I feel like that would be a result of the traffic study, not a trigger for the traffic study.
Okay.
No?
That's fine, it's valid. We can ask Leanne to clarify that.
Right.
In terms of, she kind of put more, the engineering put a bit more parameters around, we presented
Yeah.
some kind of general language to them, and then they put more parameters around what they would like to see within that traffic impact study.
yeah, and I think however they estimate, they do it regardless. This would just be saying, if they think that there will be more than 100, the study would have to be prepared.
Yeah, but is there an industry standard to baseline
Sure.
that from or something?
Yeah.
Everything they
That's why I
do
think-
is industry
Yeah.
standard.
I
Sure.
think that we can just table this piece of it to
Sure.
get some more
That's fine.
input from them would be helpful.
Okay. Do we have a motion and a second? Is that right?
Yep.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion carries.
And Cooper, just to inform the Planning Commission, next steps for the Saldo amendments? What is?
Yes, I believe there'll have to be a public hearing at City Council, and then City Council will vote to update the ordinance.
Thank you. Item 7, Bureau of Planning and Zoning updates.
Thank you. So as we discussed during caucus, we have several amendments that we're going to be working on, including the neighborhood commercial we're going to take a look at, and hopefully have more of a defined list and scope for you at the next meeting. I did want to mention that over the last several weeks, we've been working on the recommendations for the Erie Outside, the Comprehensive Recreation, Parks and Open Space Plan. We've been working on recommendations as well as this massive prioritization matrix. And it's been an interdepartmental effort having to do with the administration, with Public Works, planning. And so we're almost at the end, and we're hoping to have a draft submitted by the end of this week. I would like to remind you that you need to take the poll that Cooper sent out for the special meeting. We would like to hold that, is it next month, I believe? Next week? We want to hold that next week. So you need to take the poll today.
Which will be next month.
Which will almost be next month. We'd like to hold that next week because we're up against our time frame, which is to be fully adopted by July. So please fill that out. Also, I wanted to let you know that I wasn't able to be at the last Planning Commission in April, but I did watch I watched it on the live stream and listened to the comments that were made after Cooper kind of gave you the framework or the concept of this neighborhood framework that we're starting to work on, or that we've been working on for a while. I know that, Jason, you made some points regarding sort of requirements versus guidelines. And there's been some discussion with the neighborhood groups also as to what those requirements would be and what kind of input or how the city would be able to participate or invest also into this neighborhood plan that they're creating. So we kind of went back to the drawing board a little bit in terms of looking at what this is. How I view it, it's really about level setting here. We have so many variations of plans that come in. We've talked about that in the past. But we need some sort of level setting, some set of criteria to be able to work within the confines of, right? So that we are hopefully creating a system, not necessarily especially if we're talking about access, let's say, to parks or our bike paths or active transportation. Perhaps there's a specific criteria that needs to be within that plan to make sure that the system is in place throughout the city. So we're looking at it again. We'd like to propose something to the neighborhoods to get some feedback from them and then bring it back in front of the Planning Commission as kind of more of a formal presentation and vet through that with you. I think to your point about requirements, we don't have a lot of teeth if it's just a matter of guidelines. You know, we can set guidelines and we can recommend things, but if we require it and it's adopted and it becomes a set of criteria that's flexible enough, we don't want to make this so stringent that it becomes burdensome on these neighborhood groups, but that it's flexible enough and it makes sense and it's logical that it should be within this framework. So that's the kind of the steps we're going to take over the next month or two to refine that neighborhood framework and then present again in front of Planning Commission. I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any questions you might have?
Motion
Thank
to
you.
adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. Finally got one in. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. A long one today.